welcome to Daddy Issues. It's a new show about fathers talking about fatherhood, and my co-host is Don Tretler. If you'd like to give your...
Hi, I'm Don Tretler. I'm Fatherhood Services Coordinator with Early Education Services, and I'm also a father of one son.
And I'm not a professional. Just a dad who's raising two kids that are mine, and my girlfriend has two kids that I'm basically the father in their life. I've been with her for 4 years. They're 6 and 7, so since they were pretty little, we've lived together, and I was dating her for 6 months even before that, so they were like 1 and 2 when we met. So that added a girl to the mix, which changed my fatherhood strategy. But
Right.
I guess we could start, since this is the first episode, and I think we should just explain basically what the premise of this is. You have a radio show in Brattleboro.
Right, I've got a show called Hey Daddy-O. It comes on WVEW, the community radio station down in Brattleboro. It's WVEW 107.7. My show is called Hey Daddy-O. It comes on at 9 a.m., runs from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. on Wednesday mornings.
And he has fathers come in, and they basically do a little interview. He's got some questions that he asks on a regular basis, and he asked me one day, because we are in a parenting group at Parks Place here in Bells Falls, and he asked me if I'd be willing to come and be his guest on his show.
If I was more technologically proficient, I would have recorded it so I would be able to use it again, but I haven't recorded any of my shows down there. So I do live, and it's like art. It's a one-time thing. Once it's done, it's done.
But we definitely had a good time, and then I said, hey, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and why don't we, just using my phone, record similar conversations for an hour and post them up online, which they're not there yet, but we have some people that are interested in posting it on their website. But then I started doing a show here at Fact TV with my son, and I was like, hey, this would be a good, crossover thing where we could do it as a TV show instead of just, audio.
Do you think people will be interested to watch a show about two dads talking about being dads?
I would hope so. There's plenty of shows out there about parenting, and they're mostly from, the mom's perspective, and I like the idea that your radio show to the podcast to now this, it's about, some fathers really are in their kids' lives, and they should have a show that helps them with advice and talking about the issues of the day. And
well, one of my things too is that there's not a lot of great positive role models out in the media for dads. When you think about it, and I've done this, I've looked on the internet for lists of, say, the top 10 TV dads, something like that. And probably out of those top 10 TV dads, at least 7 of the 10 are from old television shows. They're not from recent television shows.
Bill Cosby from The Cosby Show, stuff like that.
Right.
I
can't think what his name is. Ingalls?
Oh.
From Little House on the Prairie. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can't think what his first name was. John Ingalls?
No, I honestly don't. I never really watched that show. It was too happy for me. I was too busy watching, fish not frying in the kitchen and beans not burning on the grill type of stuff,
Right. And even that, that's what? Isn't that from the Jeffersons?
Yeah. And that
George Jefferson was around.
But he wasn't really,
he wasn't a positive person. He
No.
wasn't a positive character, but.
No, and he wasn't that intelligent, so he was definitely, the joke was mocking him, kind of like All in the Family. Archie Bunker wasn't the role model. He was, you're supposed to pay attention to his daughter and her husband. Their point of view was definitely the one that was supposed to be, mimicked more than Archie
Right.
with his racial stuff. Same with George Jefferson. He was basically Archie, but for the black families,
Right.
and they were mocking both of them more than anything.
Yeah, interesting. That was kind of an interesting crossover.
I don't know.
Now, are there positive role models now? on television as far as dads go, and I don't have television right now, so I have no idea.
Even in commercials, they mock fatherhood. You know, it's like, hey, can you make the kids breakfast? And it shows the guy pouring pancake mix into a toaster or something. And it's like, okay, nobody is that dumb.
Good point. Yeah. Or one of my favorites is the dad trying to change the baby and he has no idea and he puts the diaper on backwards, or that men are so incredibly stupid that we have no idea how to parent our children, which is ridiculous.
It is. It is. Unfortunately, there are plenty of fathers in the world that have a hard time, being there for their kids. There's plenty of deadbeat dads and stuff. And unfortunately for dads like us who are very involved in our kids' lives, they give us a bad, name, because there are really dads that it's like, what, you're pregnant? And they move to another state or whatever, or, try to get off the grid so that they don't have to take care of their responsibility. And we're here to say that there's plenty of fathers that don't act that way.
Exactly. There are plenty of fathers that are involved and want to be involved in the lives of their children. And it's one of the reasons why we have a fatherhood program with Early Education Services down in Brattleboro. And there's another fatherhood program up in Burlington, but we really don't have many fatherhood programs throughout the state of Vermont. And we need it just to promote what it is to be a healthy father and to promote making sure that we stay involved in the lives of our children.
And one thing we've noticed about each other through the podcast is we may not have the same ideas of where we're coming from, whether it's politics or ideas on when a kid should see a certain rating for a movie or whatever. Even still, our goal is the same. We have the goal of, you want to raise your son to be the best man he can grow up to be. I want to raise my sons the same. I want to raise my stepson and my stepdaughter to be the best adults that they can be, and it just goes to show that we can be friends, we can get along, even though we have varying views on a lot of subjects, because we know that our goal for our kids is the same. We want them to be in a better position than our position in life. We want them to go to college and get a nice job and not, you know what I mean?
Right.
We definitely have similar goals.
Right, and one of our the big things we do is to make sure that we spend plenty of time with our children, that we're very involved in the lives of our kids and know what's going on in their lives, what interests them, what their passions are.
Absolutely. Since this is our first one, we don't have any emails yet, but we do plan on doing this show at least, as much as possible every other week. Maybe we can come in more often than that and get some in the can. But at some point, we've got an email address set up, and yep, they're on the screen. It's we got daddyissues@yahoo.com. Any questions, comments, if you have any topics you'd like us to discuss on the show, if there's any issues you're having with your children, we're more than willing to discuss them and maybe give you some ideas on how to handle the situation.
Or how we've done it, how we would do it. We could do our best. And one of the things about being a dad is that you're never going to do the job perfectly, And that's just to be a parent in general. To be a parent, you're never going to be perfect at being a parent. You're going to make mistakes. It's just a matter of, once you've done that, once you've made a mistake, move on,
Absolutely. And, having people to talk about these issues with, even if you make a mistake, if you've got a good, group of people that can give you ideas or give you advice, all that's going to do is make it that much easier when these problems come up, you
Right.
know? And yeah, I'm definitely not perfect, with my kids. Just recently, my stepdaughter was having some issues with a person at school, and that was kind of bullying her. And my comments to her were to be really straightforward. And I said, look, and I'll say it a little differently for air, but I said, little girls are mean. They're just mean. And that's going to happen. And through high school, that's going to happen. That's unfortunately something you're going to have to deal with. I said, sometimes girls can be vicious, boys are more apt to hit each other, and then the next day they'll be out playing together. I'm sorry. Oh, and little girls, on the other hand, they keep things, for a long time. Where, 2 weeks later, it's like, oh, she looked at me the wrong way 2 weeks ago, and I'm still mad about it. Boys aren't like that. Now, I'm not suggesting that you should hit one another, but a boy's more apt to go pow and then go play with trucks together in the playground or whatever, And sometimes that goes into adulthood. I mean, I know women that's like, hey, you see that girl? She called me fat 3 years ago. And it's like, get over it, And the adult version for the guys is, I'm mad at you for something, punch, let's go have a beer. I mean, so we never really outgrow that in general. Obviously, it's a generalization, but...
Yeah, but we have different ways of relating to each other.
Absolutely.
Men and women, boys and girls. Well, one of the things I thought we could talk about, something really simple and easy, is Craig and his son have a television show where they talk about horror movies. So we both kind of have like a little bit of a passion for movies. And maybe, in thinking about, because we have to keep reevaluating. I know that with my son and I, we're always talking about what's appropriate for him to see and what's not. And right now, my son is 9. So right now, he's on the balance with PG-13 movies. So sometimes we'll watch a PG-13 movie together, and luckily, you know what, I got to give the Motion Picture Association some credit for, in addition to the ratings, they've, in the past several years, they've started to put underneath, they'll say why they rated it. Does it have strong
mild
language?
violence, or brief nudity for something. So, like, for example, with my show that I do with my son, we talk about R-rated horror movies, and he's 13. Obviously, that's a little early for some parents. He's been watching scary movies since he was about 5 years old. But the way I did it was, we started with the movie It, which was made for TV, so there was a limit to the content they could show as far as violence and anything like that, and language. And when he handled that well, I slowly got scarier and more intense things for him, and I understand, a lot of parents don't want that for their kids. And like my son, Jason, I do the show with, he has a friend who's the same age as him that's not allowed to watch R-rated movies. He spent the night last night. We watched a PG-13 movie because I'm not going to go against his parents' wishes just because he's at my house. That wouldn't be fair.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I think for me, I believe it depends on the kid how old they should be before they watch it, And you're saying you're getting into that point where it's like, maybe a PG-13 movie. That seems reasonable. He's 9. I mean, it's a little early for the 13, but, like you were bringing up the extra part of the ratings where it talks about violence or sex or whatever. I do use that as a guideline because while my 13-year-old does watch these horror movies with me, I do still have him turn away when it's Friday the 13th and there's the group of kids skinny dipping. And because my theory on that is he understands that the violence is fake. He gets that. It's not going to really affect him. He doesn't feel that it's realistic or whatever. But even fake breasts are real as far as my 13-year-old's concerned. So he doesn't need to see all that.
Doesn't need to see breasts yet.
I mean, there's always well, how old were you when you started, doing stuff with girls? And it's like, I'm not going to lie, I was about his age. But I honestly don't see him being at that point yet. He doesn't even notice when girls are looking at him. I've noticed it many times where girls are like, ooh, he's cute, and he has no idea. I went to his school just a few weeks back for a concert, and this couple of girls were looking at him going by, and it's like, Jason, come over here and give me a hug. And without even looking at him, he's like, no, I'm busy, and just kept walking. And in my head, I'm going, if I was 13 and 2 girls were saying, come over and give me a hug, I'm going. Like, how is he just walking by? But it's not even, in his realm of on the other hand, I do notice when he's watching certain TV shows or whatever, he'll be looking at the girls in a way where it's like you could tell he finds them attractive and stuff, but the actually talking to the girls about, hey, you like me, I like you, he's not there.
Right.
And that's a good thing because I don't want to deal with that yet.
Well, and that's the balance, as we're talking about like PG-13 movies. I do look over to see exactly what is it that they're worried about. So sometimes there could be, they use the word intense, I think. It'll say scenes of intense imagery and things like that. So sometimes, I have to make the judgment about whether or not he's going to be able to handle stuff like that. Because basically, a lot of the rating stuff, for the most part, falls into the categories of is it going to be too violent or gory? Is it going to be too sexual? Then there's the language, of course, which the language veers toward either one of those two things. And there's also drug use. Drug use is another thing that they'll identify on a movie because it's, do we want to expose our kids to that at an early age? And it's interesting. I mean, it gives us, when we watch some of these movies that kind of, like a PG-13 movie that tests the limits for a 9-year-old.
Oh yeah.
It gives us reasons that we can bring up some of these subjects, to talk about. And we do need to talk about these things because they're going to come up one way or another.
Well, one thing that bothers me, television has ratings too. It's a different set of ratings. And there's a TV show that's for kids called The Regular Show. It's on Cartoon Network, not at night, not their Adult Swim content. It's during the day. And I'm the same one that lets these kids watch scary movies, but I'm making the decision knowing the content, what I'm allowing them to watch. But when I see a show that pops up with Y7, meaning Youth 7, I feel like I should be able to not have to be in the room because it's geared for a 7-year-old. And one episode, I was walking through the living room, and one of the characters said, "Oh, he's always pissed off." And I went, "Excuse me? That doesn't seem like a word that needs to be in a 7-year-old's show."
No.
So I've banned, my kids have, my two and my stepkids have watched Nightmare on Elm Street, and I don't want them watching a cartoon where it said something about someone being pissed off, solely because Elm Street never tried to advertise itself as for children. I, as the adult, and my girlfriend, as the other parent, made the decision based on what we knew the content was. But when the content providers lied to us about the content, that's where I drew the line. And they still haven't watched that, and they've watched horror movies.
That's a really good point too. It's what something's advertised for, and I think there are some of those. You mentioned The Regular Show because Cartoon Network kind of balances a line like that, where Regular Show. I know this because I know that my son likes these. Uncle Grandpa.
Yeah, I've seen that.
My favorite, Adventure Time with Finn and Jake.
Well, see,
which I know balances on the edge, and I do watch it with my son all the time.
There was a scene in Adventure Time that I was like not too happy about. It started out and it showed a character bent over and using a bubble wand and blowing a bubble by farting into it, and just bent over and there's his butt, and I was like,
yes.
I'm not a fan of that being aimed towards kids. Now, Adult Swim has, Family Guy and stuff like that, which are made for adults, but it's on after 10 o'clock at night. They're not programming it for kids. So to me, that's the big difference. And I've let my kids see certain episodes of South Park, for example. But it's because I know the episode, I know the moral behind it, because a lot of that show actually has a moral point to it. You wouldn't, you have to look past the, dirty words and the fart humor, but the fact is there is usually a message behind what they're saying. And if the message is positive enough, I will, decide which ones are appropriate for them to watch. But I still won't let them watch Regular Show because they lied to me. It starts off with TV mature for South Park. It's not, it's like, hey, if you're not an adult, you shouldn't watch this. Or parents should, decide, before any kids watch this. Regular Show is, hey, this is for all kids. And that's where I got irritated. I remember one time
Well, what about oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
What about the movies? You know, because some of the thing, you know, especially when it comes to like some of the scary movies and stuff, and that's something that I like them too. And I kind of like, how scary do I want to expose well, I only have one child, but how scary do we want to expose our children to some of these things? Because I'm always worried about not necessarily what they're going to handle in the moment, but like subconsciously, like what's going to play out in their dreams or nightmares. You know, what kind of stuff is going to get wedged in there that's really going to be scary.
Well, and you were mentioning before we started the movie Alien, for example. Now, I also think that you can, you know, I do a show, like I said, about horror movies, but there is such a variety of what a horror movie is. There's movies like Hostel, where it's people being, you know, tortured and disembodied and all sorts of horrible things. And then there's something like The Shining, where it's just a slow build and it's creepy, and, you know, there's not so much gore, but it's just like that slow burn that just gives you that icky feeling the whole time. Or Alien, where I don't know if they could make that movie today because people want the fast action like Aliens, the sequel. It was, you know, a bunch of the aliens, and it was like boom, 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 fight, fight, action, action. The first one, it took so long to get up to the point where I think it was a 2-hour movie, and it took an hour before you saw the alien.
Yeah.
But they built up to it, and just the suspense and stuff. I don't know if, you know, a lot of kids nowadays could handle the hour of, you know, oh, that's boring, nothing's happening. But there is something happening, and to me, that's even more effective, really.
Yeah,
you know?
I think that's the scary part, and that's why I was even thinking about, you know, showing my son Alien, because I thought, boy, that whole slow build, the real scary part of that, the suspense and everything is what's scary. And, you know, one of my favorite, as far as like a, you know, instead of even calling it a horror movie, but a scary movie, was I think it's from 1960, 1962, called The Haunting. And I remember it being like a really scary movie without being, you know, overtly, you know, gory or even having things jump out at you. But it was all that, I don't know how to put it, the imagery and the scene.
Yeah, there's like a buildup of suspense, and it's like, what's going to happen? I would say they've gotten a little ridiculous, but the first Paranormal Activity would be a recent example of that, where they're not showing blood, they're not showing a lot of violence, but there's like, whoa, you hear footsteps and you know there's no one in the house, and that door slammed, but how did that happen? All the windows are closed, there's no wind, you know, and it builds up to a, you know, big startling ending. But that, you know, I like that kind of thing where there is a slow burn, and, you know, you have the lights off and you just sit there watching it, and you can't help but get sucked into those type of things and it's creepy, and it just gets creepier and creepier.
Right.
And yeah, there's the big jump startling scare, even in Aliens, when, well, you know exactly when the alien pops out.
Right.
It's like, they didn't even tell all the actors, by the way, on Alien that was going to happen. Only the one that it was popping out of knew what was going to happen. They knew something was, but they didn't know that was good. So the reaction on all their faces was legitimate. They got startled.
Wow, that is an interesting fact.
Yeah.
That is cool.
Well, I'm doing a show where I review horror movies and look up a lot of facts about them, and even though we haven't reviewed that one yet, that is just a fact.
Well, you know what movie would be really cool?
What's that?
I think, and I remember the ad campaign in the very beginning was the, what's it called? The Witch.
The Blair Witch?
The Blair Witch Project, where it said this videotape was found in the woods, you know, 3 years later. And I think somehow, like future generations, you know, at some point, what they're going to do is, you know, after the, you know, years and, you know, people forget about it, somebody is going to say to another person, hey, we got to watch this. This was found in the woods after 3 years. And if you watch it, not knowing that it was a Hollywood production, that could be really terrifying without a lot of stuff that goes on in the movie. There's not
one
much
spot
gore.
of little blood that they found wrapped up in something. Yeah.
Right, and it's just plain scary. And there's probably some language in it, because I think it's rated R.
There's a lot of language in it. My son Jason watched that with me back when I was still together with his mom, And that's where I first got the kernel of the idea that he and I should do a horror movie review show. Because his reaction at like probably 7 years old, he looked at me after it was over, he goes, "Well, that was dumb." I said, "Why is that?" He goes, "It was a bunch of 20-year-olds running around in the woods swearing, and then it just stopped." And I was like, "Actually, it kind of was that." So, I mean, but yeah, I mean, I got scared by it when it first came out. I saw it at the drive-in, and the way the speakers were set up, there was like an echo in the woods around it. The Northfield Drive-In in Mass, there's woods around it, and there was screams and stuff echoing in the woods, and it was even creepier.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, when I got home, my wife at the time could not go to sleep with the lights off. She's like, "They're staying on," and as an adult, she's like, "Nope." So I had to sleep with the lights on because she just couldn't handle it.
It's the same thing with any of those movies that say based on a true story. That always used to that would get me right away. I'd be like, "Oh my," or you know what got me? Anytime, and they do this every so often with movies, they'll go, "Scenes so horrifying we can't show you scenes on television."
What's your opinion, speaking of movies, about there's some movies that they have a really good, solid message, but they're in an R movie. For example, Boys in the Hood. It's talking about the ghetto gang life in South Central Los Angeles, but the message is such a positive one, but there's gang violence, there's a lot of bad language, there's people smoking pot and drinking beer and stuff throughout, but the message is such a good one. It's like, that makes me kind of lean towards, well, I kind of want my kids to see that and see the positive message. Or another good example is American History X. Have you ever seen that?
Yeah.
Okay, great message. The guy was a racist skinhead, goes to jail and realizes how wrong he was and knows his brother's getting into the same stuff he was, and then all he wants is to save his brother from the life he led and turn his head around to realize that skin color isn't a reason to hate someone, and different religions or whatever. The message was, don't be like this. But they had to show graphic violence, and there was a lot of swearing and a lot of racial stuff, but the message was, that's not the way to live. Now, what do you feel about something like that? The language is bad, the violence is bad, but the message is so positive.
Yeah, I think it's tough. I think that's a tough thing to do because, for many, many years, right, they used to make movies where they had to stay within a certain boundary. They weren't allowed to curse, to show blood. They had to have like a positive ending. The bad guy couldn't get away in the end for years and years. And now it's a little bit tough. I mean, even though there's a positive message, there's a lot of other stuff you have to kind of balance. Do I want to expose my kids to that? Do I want them to hear that language so often, or to see like a positive representation of drug use or alcohol use, something like that? So it's a tricky line to balance, It's like, and that's why I brought this up, is that there's a lot of really tricky lines with some of these movies and television shows. It's kind of like, geez, do I want to show my kids this, or do I not want to show my kids this? And It's hard enough for us as parents to make those decisions. But then you've got other, like rating systems. You've got the movie rating systems or the television rating systems, or whoever the people are that are airing some of the television shows that are going to make the decision about what time are we going to show these things.
Well, perfect example is right here on Fact TV, my son's show with me, reviewing horror movies. At one point we were talking maybe could play clips from the movies, and there's a certain time that those clips could be played. And I was like, you know what, to make it be able to be played earlier so more people might be able to see it, let's not play those clips, We do play the trailers, but it's the green band trailers that, would be on regular television during the day anyway.
Right.
But, we actually had to decide, like, do we want to play clips of, we always talk about our favorite scenes, for example. Do we want to play some of those scenes? And then it's like, well, then we'd have to be on at a time when people wouldn't necessarily be up watching Channel 8,
Yeah, that's true.
But speaking of movies, something that we did on our podcast before was I go to Snopes.com and look up real, or urban legends, and see if they're real or fake. And speaking of movies, I looked up their section on Disney movies, and there's plenty of urban legends about Disney. So many that all movies have one section. Disney movies not only have their own section, but it's like Disney and then subcategories of theme parks, movies, the man himself. Like it's, the Walt Disney Company as a whole. That's how many urban legends there are. Just
Wow.
So I wrote down some, and I figured we could go over what the urban legends are and see if you can guess if they are true or false.
Cool. I'm up for it.
So I have to keep this faced away from you so you don't see the answer. The first one, because you brought it up while we were discussing the show, is where was it? I know it's in here.
Song of the South.
Yes, Song of the South was never released on video in the USA. True or false?
Oh, it was never released.
On video.
Ooh, I got to think about this. Well, because videotapes kind of started to come out around in the 80s. I'm gonna say false. I'll bet it was released, but then they stopped.
No, you were right when we were talking about it earlier that it's true. It has never, they never released it on home video or DVD or anything here. In other countries, yes. So you can find copies of it on, eBay or something, but then you have to get the DVD players that play, different, they have different, what do they call them?
Like beta?
No, they have different DVD players that are set up differently or whatever in other countries, and you have to get one that'll play their versions. But no, as far as the United States, it's never been released.
Wow.
So
there are many generations of Disney fans that are not going to get exposed to the Song of the South.
well, I mean, it was very blatantly racist. I mean, the African.
It's been a long time since I've seen the movie.
Oh yeah, but I mean, it had the
Did you see
story
it?
of the Tar Baby, and I had a book that came with a 45 record where it's like follow along, and when you hear the chime, change the page, and of the story of Brer Rabbit and the Tar Baby, which was part of Song of the South. It wasn't the whole movie, but I mean, just the, I can understand why, especially as politically correct as we are and how blatantly racist that movie was, I can kind of see why they're like, yeah, probably not going to release it in America. All right, how about this one? True or false? Disney made an animated film called The Story of Menstruation.
No, that's false.
No, that is absolutely true. It was made, yeah.
That's great.
That is a fact. It was made as something that they could play for little girls in like 5th grade when they start doing sex ed and they learn about their bodies and stuff. They play that. It was made to play that in the classroom for the girls.
Wow, I'm 0 for 2. I'm not going to win the prize.
Well, and it's animated. I don't even want to imagine, does Mickey come in? Oh boy! Hi boys and girls, I'm Mickey Mouse. I'm gonna turn it over to Minnie, because I don't know anything about this.
Oh my.
And then Pooh's in the corner. Oh bother.
They had no, did they even have female characters in Winnie the Pooh?
Yeah, Kanga, the mother kangaroo.
Oh, all right.
And I think they showed Christopher Robin's mom from the knee down a couple times, but for the most part, I think it was all males. All right, how about this one? True or false? Finland once banned Donald Duck because he doesn't wear pants.
Oh, that sounds true. That sounds definitely true.
You are on a roll because it's false. But that was an internet rumor for a while.
Yeah, that sounds like something I've heard, that he wouldn't wear pants. But Finland, I don't know that they're that conservative there. But so I don't know. All right, so I'm 0 for 3. I'm definitely not winning the car today.
This one might be a little tricky. In the movie The Lion King, there's a scene where Simba's looking up in the sky, and the clouds are dissipating, and they form. It's like a dust cloud or something, but it forms the letters SEX in a couple of frames.
I don't know. I've seen some of these subliminal things, and that sounds like something you could stop and prove. So I'm going to say that's a true one.
That one, they consider it undetermined. They showed the footage, and it does look it, but it's like the S is kind of misshapen. The X isn't quite right. So it's like, was it intentional? Was it not? They really, even seeing that you can see it there, you can't really tell if it was legitimately made that way.
So it could have been an accident.
It could have been. So that's why they considered it undetermined. All right. If you listen closely to the vocal track on the movie Aladdin, there's a spot where Aladdin says, "All good teens take off your clothes."
Oh my word. All right. No, false.
That is false. They isolated that vocal track away from the music and everything. And actually what it is in a really bad edit where they weren't supposed to play that part of a vocal track, and the way it cut, it seemed like that, but it was two different lines that neither one was supposed to actually be on the film, cut in a way that it sounded similar to that, but it wasn't. So
I'm getting warmer.
there you go.
I'm getting hip to this scene.
All right. You know the movie The Rescuers, the mice that...
Oh, I've never seen it. No. But I'm aware that
Okay.
there was a film.
True or false, there is a photograph of a topless woman in like 2 frames of that movie.
A photograph,
A photograph.
not like
No, not drawn. Some like
No, I'm going to say false for that one.
no, that one's true. There's a scene where and on Snopes you can see it. This show, I don't think it would be appropriate to air the picture, but as they're flying past a house in 2 frames, it looks like it's behind the window that they're flying over the house of, and there is a actual photograph of a topless woman in 2 of the frames. DVDs and Blu-rays make it a lot easier to see them, but you go frame by frame in this spot, and there are 2 of them that show a woman that looks like she's changing clothes as the animated mice are flying by.
Wow.
Yep, and they have the evidence at Snopes. Here's one that I guarantee you've heard the rumor anyway.
Hope kids aren't watching this show.
Yeah. There was a phallus on the cover of the original Little Mermaid videotape that was drawn by a disgruntled employee as his way of going, "Oh, you want to fire me?" And then one of the castle tiers looks like a man bit.
Wow. Okay, yeah, I'll buy that. True.
While they did change the cover, because it did definitely look like that, there was no disgruntled employee. It was actually the photograph. They just used the same painting artwork from the poster that they had it when it was in the theaters, and all of the towers look very phallic, and it was not intentional. It was just one of the towers. But because it's one of those things where nobody sees it until you tell someone it's there, and then their eye zones in on it. But it was not a disgruntled employee. It does look like that, but it wasn't someone, saying, "Okay, you're gonna fire me, here's your punishment. I'm gonna do this to a kid's movie."
Wow.
So it's false, but there is some truth to the fact that it does look like that. Speaking of The Little Mermaid, there was a rumor going around that in the scene where there's a marriage taking place between Ariel and the prince, the priest who's officiating the wedding, it looks like the front of his robe kind of goes up in a weird spot, like he's enjoying the wedding more than he should.
I've seen this, so I know that's true.
That is also false. That is his knee. He was taking a step, and under the robe where his knee was, it just lifted that up.
Wow.
Because if you look, the guy is a little person, basically, and that is him taking a step. And if you watch, every time he takes a step, it moves the robe where his knees are hitting it. So yes, it does look like that if you freeze frame it, but no, that's not actually what it was. See? Even the ones you knew, you weren't sure. I only got a couple more of these.
This is fun. You folks, if you're watching this, you're probably going, "Boy, that guy's really dumb. He's not getting any of these right."
Actually, the thing is, these are, a lot of these have gone on for years, even pre-internet, where these rumors go around. So that's why I think it's fun, is like Were any of them based on fact or no, you know?
Right.
And the fact that you're not sure just proves the fact that you can see how they spread.
Sure.
How about the look of Tinkerbell? Rumor was she was based on the look of Marilyn Monroe when they designed her for Peter Pan.
Wow. No, that's false. Because
Hey,
I'm going
you
to say
got one.
Tinkerbell came before Marilyn Monroe, I think.
I believe that's accurate. That it was actually prior to her celebrity, but there was a rumor that, you know, oh, she looks like Marilyn Monroe, but I don't see it, by the way. She doesn't look anything like her. Now, Marilyn Munster on the Munsters was supposed to look like Marilyn Monroe. That was a fact, but Tinkerbell, no.
Marilyn and the Munsters though had
I mean, they even
dark
named
hair with a
she
white.
was blonde. No, the
Marilyn,
normal
Marilyn.
one.
Right.
The
Okay.
blonde normal one that
You're right.
was the weirdo of the family.
Yeah.
All right, I got two more. Let's see. Oh, the Disney company will replace scratched or broken DVDs if you mail them to them for a small fee.
They'll replace them for a small fee.
So you don't have to go out and rebuy the entire movie. You can, like, if it's scratched, they'll buff it out. If it's broken, they'll send you a new disc for a couple bucks.
Wow. You know what? You know, I know L&L Bean, replaces stuff. So yeah, sure, why not? I'll go. True.
Not only Disney, but other movie companies too. There's quite a few companies that have that policy. If you send them the disc, you don't have to go out to Walmart or Target or wherever you buy your DVDs and purchase a new copy for 18, 20 bucks. For like $2 or $3, they will send you a new copy of the disc.
Nice.
Yep.
That's good to know.
It's good to have a
because-
positive one in there because a lot of those are pretty negative.
Right. When you watch some of these movies so many times, like the one that comes to mind for me and my son is Cars. That we've seen Cars like a bazillion times. That I actually brought the disc to the video store where they will do that service for you too. They'll I want to say they almost remelt the plastic for you, so they'll
They basically buff it out.
they do a buff on.
They
it,
have
yeah.
like a thing that it fills in the scratches and stuff. If it's scratched too deep, they can't. But if it's
Right.
just the light scratches that most DVDs get on them that, just happen from normal use.
That has a lot of. I like Cars because it has so many great lines. Get a good look, city boy.
Well, what I like is the fact that George Carlin was in it.
Fly away, Stanley. Be free.
And what was the other guy? Cheech Marin from Cheech and Chong. And I just love how many times comedians who are not appropriate for kids end up in Disney movies being appropriate,
Yeah.
to be fair.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. Aladdin even referenced a old bit from the 70s that was done by
Robin Williams.
Robin Williams, yes, I couldn't think of his name for a second. And I can say this because it's not actually going to swear. In his stand-up, he claimed that his high school football cheer was "Rick'em, rack'em, rock'em, ruck'em, take that ball, go out and fight." Okay? Now, so it didn't curse, but in Aladdin, when Aladdin is fighting Jafar, who turned into a snake at that point, the genie comes out and says, "Rick'em, rack'em, rock'em, rake, stick that sword into that snake." But I'm telling you, parents my dad's age that were bringing their kids to that movie in the theater, some of them had obviously seen that stand-up special because when he went, "Rick'em, rack'em, rock'em," I heard a few adults go, like, they couldn't believe he was referring to that in the kids' movie.
Right.
But I love that they can do that to keep the parents entertained. And there's no way the kid was going to get, none of the kids were going to get that joke, you know? The Rugrats movie had a few jokes for the adults. The Lego movie that just came out, same thing. There's a few things that it's the kids aren't going to get it, but here's one for the parents, you know?
And we need that. I mean, if we're going to sit, as parents, sometimes if we're going to sit through these movies time and time again, we have to have some stuff that's going to amuse us. And, I love the Pixar movies. And like I say, Cars
They are good.
was one of my favorites. Just the line after line. Hey, you got to break bread with your mashpuka.
And I will say there's one last one here, and
Oh, go ahead. Good. I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. No, we kind of veered off, but that's what's good about these is it can help us, discuss further topics. I'm sure you've heard the rumor that lemmings were coaxed off of a cliff for a nature film. And lemmings not only do not jump off of cliffs and kill themselves on a regular basis, but the people filming this kind of coaxed them to killing them just for this nature film.
Wow.
You've never heard that?
No.
Well, do you think that's true
Do
or
I think
false?
it's true?
Did Disney basically have lemmings murdered for a nature film?
No, false.
Well, you rounded it out the way you started it because it is absolutely a fact. That happened.
That Disney killed lemmings.
The whole thing where, people say, oh, what do you, jump off a cliff, and they refer to you as a lemming if you're just a follower, no matter what's happening.
That was
Turns
based
out
on the Disney movie.
that was based on the Disney movie, and they don't naturally do that on their own. That was something
Son
they
of
were
a
coaxed.
gun.
Yep. So that would be our Snopes section, but
Wow, that was pretty interesting.
I thought so. At least there was one positive thing in there about Disney, the replacing the DVDs.
Yeah.
But anyway, I had mentioned, the stuff where adult content gets kind of like subliminally put in there in kids' movies, and you're saying you thought that was good. The two that, when I first really noticed it myself, there was a girl that I wanted to date, and she wasn't sure if she wanted to or not. And this was back pre-meeting my ex-wife even, so this was a while back. But she had a niece that wanted to see the Rugrats movie. So I took her and her niece there as kind of like a first step towards maybe next time the kid can stay home. And there was a couple of things in it that were definitely for the adults, but it went right over the kids' heads. I don't know if you remember the show Rugrats, or if you, okay.
Yeah, I had a niece. I had a
Okay.
niece that was,
'Cause I knew
the
your son
totally
was probably too
appropriate
young.
age when that came out.
Yeah, and it's about babies that, they talk, but the parents can't understand them, and vice versa. But in the movie was when the main character had a brother being born. So they had his brother Dill, their last name was Pickles. So of course it was Dylan or Dill Pickles. But anyway, that wouldn't be the subliminal joke. That was right out there and not that funny. It's like, wow, now your character's stuck with a pun. But while the mother was pregnant, there was a scene where her sister-in-law came over and said, so is it going to be a boy or a girl? And she said, oh, well, the doctor said it's going to be a girl. And she goes, I don't know, because this woman was into astrological stuff. She goes, born under Venus, look for a, and then her phone rings. She's like, hello? But, none of the kids got that, but it was obvious what they were saying.
Right.
The other one was there's a scene where there's a song in the nursery, and all the kids are singing about having just been born, and one of them goes, they cut my cord, and another one looks down his diaper and says, consider yourself lucky. Now, again, the kids didn't get that, but every parent knows exactly what they were talking about.
Yeah, you would think that the kids would ask questions about it when they got home too, so it could be, dangerous territory.
But it was
Why was he looking in his diaper?
But it was such a, short little one-liner that the kids probably didn't even
Right.
realize it. And, it's kids' cartoons, fast-moving images. It's not going to hang out on that one thing, So I guess as far as it goes, we might have different ideas of what's age appropriate for our kids, but it seems like we both want to guide our kids towards movies that we feel are okay for them,
Yeah, but we don't, you don't want to go too far and push things too far. I mean, I'm always willing to answer questions about things, but where I get a little worried about instilling, fear. For instance, you mentioned The Shining, and The Shining, there's a whole controversy that goes around The Shining because of Stanley Kubrick. There's a movie called Room 237, which had to do with, I think it's called 237. I could have the number wrong, but about conspiracy theories that go along with that film. But and the film is very moody, and it's really, really, cool and scary. But I considered not showing it to my son because the ghost, the spirit, takes over the dad, and the dad starts to chase the mom and the kid around. And I thought, wow, I don't want to plant that thought in my son's head right now. So that was one of the reasons I kind of backed off that movie, because there's because I don't know if there's a lot in there that's that would be totally inappropriate. So looks like time is winding down.
It does.
At least the clock says that.
Yes. Any last thoughts? I mean, I guess our main topic today had been movies. I think
Be aware, be aware and
Absolutely.
be careful what you show your kids, and be prepared to answer the questions that you're going to bring up with some of these.
because even in PG movies, sometimes they'll make a reference to sexuality, or the movie My Girl, for example, is a kids movie or a family movie, but in the first one, Macaulay Culkin's character, spoiler alert, passes away, and that'll bring up the subject of death, So even movies that are okay for kids, Old Yeller, gets rabies and has to be put down. I mean, these are going to cause conversations with your kid. And my main opinion would be just be honest with your kids. When it comes to the subjects of death, or if they mention drug use, let them know age appropriate wise what is what they need to know, because obviously if they're too young you don't want to get into too much information on some of them, but answer what you feel is right at their age and their level, and try to be as honest as possible and set down the guidelines of, well, this is how I expect you to be about it. You know what I mean?
Right.
I think that's the best way to handle that type of thing is, whatever you feel is appropriate for your kid at their age may differ from parent to parent, but just make sure you have the open and honest communication with your children.
Yeah, you want to try to remain honest with them about these things, and like I said, don't expose them to things that you're not willing to answer questions about.
All right. Well, this has been our first episode of Daddy Issues, and I've been one of your hosts, Craig Jakes.
I'm Don Tretler. Thanks for tuning in to our what would you call it? Our
Pilot.
Our pilot
And
episode here. Hopefully, we'll keep continuing on doing this show. And
just like on our podcast, you want to end it the same way?
sure.
This has been Daddy Issues, and
Wait till your
dad
father gets home.